What's up, my community? If it's your first time, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. So it is my goal on this platform that I've created to highlight and support Black businesses, to create a platform where we can tell our stories of virtue and triumph and overcoming adversity and providing inspiration and joy. And one of those ways in which I am able to accomplish that goal is interviewing amazing individuals within our Black community who are doing amazing things. And today I am so excited and honored to present to some and introduce to others Miss Willette Roper of Triad Roper Realty.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here and for taking a few minutes out of your day, Miss Willette, to talk to me and to do this interview. I really do appreciate it. So let people know a little bit of background about Miss Willette here. My husband and I, back in 2019, when we were looking to purchase a home, my husband happened to stumble across Willette through the internet. And to be completely honest, she was a godsend. I have heard horror stories of individuals in their home buying purchasing process, especially as first-time home buyers. We were first-time home buyers. I literally know of an acquaintance that literally ended up being hospitalized due to stress and just all the anxiety that went along with her home buying process. And but my husband and I, we got connected with Willette. And the amazing thing is that we didn't know what we didn't know. We just were looking in the way that we knew to look. And, but it's like Willette, she was able to read between the lines and kind of give us some direction, leading us in a direction we didn't even consider in purchasing like building our own home, in which that was something we did not even consider, but it ended up being the best thing we could have ever done. And so I've just always just wanted to promote her in any way that I could. And I'm just so grateful that we had the experience of working with her. I don't know that the process could have went any more seamless than it did. It just went so well. And we look forward to working with her in the future. So I'm just here to open up the floor, talk to Willette, talk to her a little bit about how she got into real estate, and let her give you some insight. So Willette, thank you again. Thank you so much again. So I will just open it up to you and, let people know a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in real estate? What inspired you to even get into real estate?
Yeah, so I'm originally from here, local, Winston-Salem, born and raised, UNCG for my undergrad. So, because people always ask, so I'm a triad girl. Yeah. Prior to real estate, I was a Spanish interpreter in the medical field. So real estate was kind of the furthest thing from my mind. I've been in the business now, it'll be 8 years this summer. But what inspired me to become an agent was, number one, the flexibility. And number two, my dad was a real estate investor. So I always looked at real estate from like an investment point of view. I never thought I'd be selling real estate. I can remember being in high school and I would have like all the real estate magazines and all the articles and all the ads. And I'm looking at the houses and what I'm going to buy and how many houses I'm going to get by this age. And I bought my first home at 20. But what happened was life happened. And I learned with the workforce and the jobs that I was in, it just wasn't working. So tried out bail bonding. And that wasn't working either. That's dangerous. So then I made my way into real estate. I thought, you know what? I've always liked real estate, had a passion for it. Why not combine two things that I like, real estate, flexibility, and that's how I ended up becoming a real estate agent.
That is quite an interesting path.
Very diverse background of different things. Yeah.
And I think that it's beautiful in just highlighting the fact that you don't have to come from this particular background in order to have a successful career in real estate. You know, you can come from being a Spanish interpreter, and then find your way to real estate. So that is it's so awesome. So what were some challenges that you faced along your journey in becoming a real estate agent, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenge was just the first year. The test alone, North Carolina is one of the hardest, we have one of the hardest real estate exams. So there were people, I went to real estate school, they just gave up, they had to keep repeating the test and they didn't do it. I had to repeat the test, but I felt like it was confirmation that I was supposed to be where I was doing what I did. So I didn't look at it as, well, maybe God's trying to tell me that, I shouldn't do this. No, nothing that is worthwhile is going to come easy. So I just looked at it as, well, I got to press through. So my first year in real estate, once I actually did pass the exam after a couple of times, I didn't do a sale for the first year. I watched some of my colleagues that were graduated the same time I did. They had their first sale, maybe 2 months in. There were a few colleagues of mine, they didn't do anything either, and they eventually kind of gave it up. But I kind of had the hard knocks. So I had a lot of things going on that first year with my clients, but for whatever reason, it's like every single deal fell through. I even had death of one client in one situation. There was a car accident in another situation. I mean, it was like one thing after another, lending challenges. But, I felt like this is where God wanted me to be. There were other things that I felt confirmed that I was on the right path. Mm-hmm. So I stuck it out, and other agent colleagues of mine were telling me, sometimes it's like that, but when it rains, it pours. And they were right. When it rains, it pours. So I'm blessed to be where I am now. I'm my own broker, my own firm. I do real estate full time. So it's a full-time job, sometimes more than a job. Sometimes it's like 14 hours, 16 hours a day. And some days it's very laid back, but I enjoy what I do.
That's awesome. And I can imagine that as a real estate agent, where you said, sometimes it's 14 hours a day, but I bet that there you find yourself playing other roles other than real estate agent.
Yeah.
Maybe being somebody's comforter, comforter, or a bit of their psychologist and talking through things.
I do. I do. I wear a lot of hats. Mm-hmm. A lot of hats.
I can only imagine. And so you've talked a lot about, what inspired you to keep going and what motivated you to keep going. And I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about, like, during, those times where you did have that year of where it was like, I'm not getting anything, and you had those challenges with the different individuals you were working with. How did you stay, how did you stay so focused in sticking it out? What were some of the things that helped you to stay focused and to stick it out and to keep going where you had other colleagues that just fell by the wayside?
I had a vision. And I felt that I also had a divine confirmation. So my faith, I felt strongly about this was for me. This was no matter what, I may have bumps, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I just, I had that foundation that I stuck with. And, I felt like really at the time there was nothing else that I even knew what to do outside of real estate. So I'm like, this is it. This is what I'll do till I retire.
That's awesome because, as you were talking about the adversity that you hit, and instead of looking at it like, well, God, okay, this might be you just telling me, just girl, go in a different direction. Instead, you were inspired by the challenge, and it was more of like a confirmation inside of like, no, because of the challenges, you need to stick this thing out because there's going to be a big reward for you in the end. And I think that's amazing. I'm thinking of, some of the questions that individuals might be thinking of, that might be listening to this story and going, man, I've been thinking about getting into real estate. So whenever you're going through that journey of completing the exam that you have to complete, what kind of like studying, time did you have to put into it? What was the effort required to prepare yourself for that exam?
What I did, they have where you can pay and get like a course. You can take an extra course and they'll try to prepare you. I took that. I still didn't pass it with that. A colleague of mine actually gave me some tips that she found online. So really through like Googling, and also she and I would quiz each other, and then do like practice tests and stuff. I think that's what really did it. But it's really just a lot of things on there that will trip you up because they word it differently on the test than what you actually learn in the classroom.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have, because I had at a point in time considered the idea of real estate, more so, thinking about flipping houses, but then also actually getting into real estate as agents, becoming an agent. And the guy, colleague of mine who was giving me information that he had used to study, he was telling me the same thing, that the verbiage, the vocabulary, it can really, really be trippy. So you have to read very clearly and carefully what they're asking. And I kind of wanted to go back just a little bit too and talk about, so you mentioned that your dad was a real estate investor. And that was where your initial thought of getting involved in real estate was in investing. So can you talk a little bit about what's the difference between like being a real estate investor and then actually like going into becoming an actual agent?
Yeah, so he had an agent he would use sometimes to help him buy properties or sell properties, but he was more so like a property manager. So he didn't manage other people's properties, he managed his own. At one point, he had about 40, and it allowed him to retire early. But I mean, it was a job where he was gone morning to night, having to do maintenance and phone calls in the middle of the night and that sort of thing. So he eventually, several years later, used what he made to be able to get a business, a different business, and kind of transitioned out of it. But real estate was what allowed him to be able to live that dream. And he still held a few properties, just to have that passive income coming in.
That's awesome. And is there any kind of like educational courses that, might be recommended for individuals who might be thinking about either getting into the investment side of it or either the actual agent side of it?
I'm sure there are online courses. A lot of those are from like people who are well known that have books and things out. I think it's one of those things you just learn better as you go along. Because there's a lot of investors I work with, they never took a course. My dad never took a course. He didn't even have a high school education. So I mean, anybody can jump in and learn. It's just a learning experience. He flipped a few also, but he was more so a rent, kind of a passive income person. Because flipping is a different side of it, as well. But yeah, anybody can. But I think it's going to be one of those things where you just learn as you go.
It's like more of like a putting your hands to the plow and kind of learning the trade. That's awesome. I in my mind, I imagine that maybe if someone wanted to take courses on it or something, they could even find courses at maybe like the community college or something.
I haven't seen any, but YouTube would probably be a good.
Yes, YouTube University. That's what I call it, because I'm like, you can find this about
you can find anything.
I'm telling you. I mean, just learning how to edit these videos. I'm like, YouTube University. So, one of the other things I was interested in learning about is, or in individuals out there that may be wondering, are you considered a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, and what is the difference between the two?
So once you're licensed, you can represent buyers or sellers. It's the same license. The only difference is in that transaction who you're representing. So like if somebody's looking to buy, then they need a buyer's agent. So in that case, I would be looking out for their best interest, helping them with the offer, showing them homes, giving them their options, helping them put together the inspections and that sort of thing. The seller's agent is the listing agent. That's the agent that has the for sale sign in the yard. So a lot of people aren't aware of that. But when you call that agent up, and if you give them any personal information about yourself, then they're obligated to tell the seller. And that's usually the first thing that somebody will do. They see a for sale sign. They don't know how this works, so they're going to call it. And then when they call, they're like, well, hey, I can give this amount of money, or I was approved for this and I'd be willing to pay this, but can I offer this? So you just have to know who's working for who. You can represent both buyer and seller in the same transaction. You'll be what they call a dual agent. A dual agent, basically, you can't really give too much advice to one party because then you'll be disloyal to the other. So at that point, you're kind of reduced to just explaining like the paperwork and that sort of thing. There is no fee for buyer agency. Some people don't know that. We collect a commission from this listing agent company.
Okay. But that actually is very interesting to know, because that was one thing that I certainly did not know. You go into it automatically assuming that whether it be in your closing costs or whether it be in the overall cost of things or whatever, that as the buyer, you are going to be directly paying the agent that you're working with. But if I'm understanding it correctly, it is the company in which the agent worked for that is where the funds are coming from. Is that right?
It's coming from the seller. So the seller they have a listing agreement with that listing agent's company. And so that company will normally split that commission 50-50 if they have a buyer's agent in the transaction. If they're a dual agent, they keep the full commission. And then home builders, new construction, they will pay real estate agents also. The only exception is like for sale by owner, they don't have an agreement up front with an agent, so they may not pay. And if a buyer is wanting an agent in that type of transaction, they may have to pay their agent in that instance.
Okay, now that is very interesting. And you also brought up another point and a question that I had, because I was wondering if it was a good idea to have, if an agent was, representing both, and how they went about representing both in the most fairest way, because if I'm the buyer and I knew that my agent was also the seller's agent, in my mind, I would probably assume that they're trying to help the seller get more money, so, right. Those things are, and so in thinking about that, how might someone who is, whether they're the buyer or the seller, but maybe more so towards the buyer, but either way, what are the types of things that individual might be looking for in an agent to represent them, to help, and to know that this might be the right fit for me?
Yeah, I would say knowledge. If you're the seller, you want an agent that's knowledgeable about the area. We have so many now, and I guess it's just the market where maybe a friend or relative knows of an agent and they referred someone, a friend of theirs in Raleigh. So it could be someone in Winston that really doesn't have a clue about Raleigh, but somehow they're listing in Raleigh. So, you want to make sure that the agent is knowledgeable. And the same goes for a buyer, especially if you're a buyer that maybe is out of town. We have a lot of people relocating to North Carolina. So it's important to get an agent that's knowledgeable, but also an agent that's flexible if you're on the buyer side, because properties now are staying on the market less than 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And usually if they're on the market for longer than that, it's because they're going to set it up to be kind of like a bidding war type of deal. So you want to have an agent that can get out to look at that property if you can't, to either video or do like some type of video chat or some way of checking out that property so that you don't miss out on it. Because we don't have a lot of time where if something pops up on the Monday, well, we can schedule to look at it on the Saturday type of deal. And then if you're a seller, it's a good idea to have an agent that's going to bring you the most exposure, because that's really what you want. You're paying them to market your house to get the most exposure and in turn bring you the most money. So somebody that's obviously bilingual or because I get that a lot. I get a lot of people that will seek me out because of that. That's going to bring a little more exposure. Somebody that maybe is, has more connections. That's going to bring more exposure. Maybe somebody that does marketing a little different than an agent. They're going to have, bring you more exposure. So that's important too.
And I totally forgot to sort of hone in on that point too. The fact that you are bilingual, so it allows you an opportunity to be able to help a market where other individuals might not be able to assist because they wouldn't that communication or that language barrier. I think that is amazing. And when you were talking about knowledge, one of the things that I thought about in our experience working with you too is just the little tidbits of information that you can help to a person that is not as knowledgeable going through that process, like knowing when you look at the cost of the house that's up for market based on like the tax value and certain things like that. Let's look at this, let's figure out why is it listed for this much, but the tax value is this much. And those are kind of things that I remember you bringing up that helped even my husband, as he was looking through the paperwork and everything too. And it was like, oh, I wouldn't have even thought about that because maybe they've listed this house too much, So I definitely can understand why it is extremely important to have a agent representing you that is knowledgeable. And to your point, knowledgeable and also knowledgeable about the area, just good information. So one of the other questions that I wanted to ask was, you've already given a lot of good information already, but is there anything specific that any particular information that someone who is just starting their buying journey or just starting their selling journey, this is the first time they've done it, if there is some, information that you feel is extremely important for them to know as they begin to start that process?
Yeah, for a buyer, most important thing is getting pre-qualified, getting the pre-approval. You never know where you stand until you've talked to a lender. And it's very intimidating for a lot of people because nobody wants to feel like they're rejected. But even if you've got things to work on, you'll never know what needs to be fixed or what to work on if you never have anybody check it. So that's the first step. That way you know what you can afford, what you should be looking at. There are loans that are only designated for certain areas, for certain type of housing. So it's important to get that step out of the way. Even if you feel like, well, I'll be ready a year from now, you need to still go ahead and have someone check your credit so that you could have your credit fixed or repaired in a year from now. And it's not even about having something on your credit. A lot of times people have good credit, but still can't get a home. There are other factors that they look at besides credit score. So everybody's always caught up on score. So you don't know, or sometimes you think something may have fallen off your credit and maybe a lender pulls it and it's still on there. So go ahead and get that out of the way and then we can go to the fun part.
Yeah. That is, and so what about on the seller side? They might be like, well, I'm just getting started with this journey. What might be some advice or some tidbit of information you might want to share with them?
Yeah, on the seller side, it's going to be getting your house ready. So if you know that you're thinking of putting it on the market, go ahead and start thinking of, things you can do to improve. If you need to call an agent out just to kind of give you tips on what to do, there's a lot of things you can do to give the house an appearance of an upgrade, but not really like a full upgrade. And one of the things that comes to my mind as we're talking is behind me. This is paneling. So I painted it, and it gives the house a whole brighter appearance. But there's a lot of little tricks like that you can do. You can just change the knobs on the cabinet. You can do a lot of little things, change the light fixtures, and give the house kind of a fresh look, and possibly bring in a little more money. So just go ahead and kind of be doing some research, or have an agent come out and give you little tips like that of what you can do to get your house show ready.
I love it. And just kind of going back to when you were talking about tidbits or information for the buyer, you're right. It can be very intimidating going to get that pre-qualification. I know for myself, that has been one of the things that has always been in the back of my mind, one of the most intimidating parts of starting the process. But I think, to your point, the reason it, even as intimidating as it might be, it still is worth going to do it, because where you might think you're working on something, and like you said, where you might think that you're working on something to get it better so you can be ready in a year's time, that year's time come and you go get the pre-qualification and they tell you something completely different. And if you would have just went ahead and went when you were, going to start the process, then you could have taken that year to work on all of that. So I really, really think that it's important for us to know, and especially, I know if you're a young person starting out, or, if you're a person who has struggled with your credit or struggle with finances, we all know that that is a very, very soft, sensitive spot.
And it is. It is.
I would imagine that having an agent who is very sensitive to that, and who is able to help coach you through that is also important. Because to have someone that you're working with that you can tell they want to help you win as well, I think it's very important, and it adds to that positive experience. So even if you are having financial challenges or whatever, having someone that is going to work with you and help you to know, like, you can get through this. You can get through this. Continue to work, continue to do the work, and you're going to get through it. It helps. And then, and I know for myself now that, because of your help and we, being homeowners, at some point, if we decide to sell this house, it will definitely be important to know those pieces of information to help us to make the best experience on that as well, in selling a home. And so just those small tidbits, like you said, where you can have the image and the appearance of an upgrade without going and breaking the bank and, taking all the money out of your savings.
Exactly.
I think is amazing. So is there anything else that, comes to your mind? And I think one of the biggest things for me that I think about when it comes to real estate is education, and being able to educate yourself, working with a knowledgeable agent to help educate yourself. Is there any additional information or anything that comes to your mind? Because I know that as you're working on the front lines with individuals, as they're purchasing homes, as they're buying homes, is there something that you see on a regular basis that you're like, man, if I could tell anybody who's going through this, if I could tell them this, or, is there anything else that you just would like to give as information to those out there in the real estate world, whether it be about starting a real estate business or going through the home purchasing or selling process, on whichever spectrum it is?
Just be communication. I think that's so important, whether you're thinking of going into business. If you are, you have to communicate with your clients. That's just good customer service. And if you are working with a real estate agent, I get so many buyers and sellers that maybe a year ago they were working with someone, or a few years ago, and for whatever reason it didn't work out, they didn't buy, or they ended up not selling. And the number one thing they tell me is my agent did not communicate with me. I could never get them on the phone. They would never return my phone calls. And then in my mind, I'm thinking, well, why were you still working with that person? I mean, even now I get people that will say that and kind of contemplate, who they want to work with, and then sometimes end up going back to those people. But I know for me personally, as a consumer, that is one of my pet peeves, whether I'm, being serviced somewhere or, if I'm working with another professional, is I need someone to communicate with.
Yes.
Yeah. Lending experiences, when I'm working with lenders or referring buyers to lenders that I use, I'm usually referring them to somebody that I know is going to answer the phone or call them back, going to have some type of reasonable response time. I think that is stressful in itself, because a lot of times people are like, well, did they get my paperwork? Are they turning me down? Or what's going on? I haven't heard from them in 72 hours. So a lot of issues can just be avoided and can be smoother by just having communication, somebody that's, going to pick up the phone and be responsive.
I completely agree. And I'm glad that you talked about lenders that you might refer people to, because I think that having that a part of the service as well, because if you don't know, and you might think, well, my mom, they went with their home is with this company, or you just don't know. And so if you have an agent that can refer you to a lending agent or a lender, that can definitely be so beneficial. And one of the other things that you said that brought to my mind about individuals who are working with the agent and they stick with them whether they're communicating or not, and then may go back to them. How does it work? And because I know for going through the process for us, sometimes it got a little bit nerve-wracking to start working with someone or talking to an agent about what you were looking for, because they wanted to have you to sign some type of an agreement.
Yeah.
And then it said, okay, you are working with me now, and therefore any purchase at this point that you do, you're working with me. So how does that work? Because from what I recall, when we worked with you, it wasn't until later in the process when there was any contract ever signed.
Yeah.
How do people navigate that situation where they reach out to an agent just to get information or whatever? That agent says, oh, okay, well, before I talk to you, you got to sign a contract or something like that. How do people navigate that?
It varies with agents. So it's really just how the agent is comfortable. So if somebody off the bat is telling me a horror story about, another agent, my first question is, did you sign anything? Because if they did, I'm going to say, well, you've got to terminate that relationship or let them know before we can move on. Because if you sign, then you could be liable for their commission as well as mine. So you want to make sure that's terminated if you're wanting to go that route. And I think because they don't know, and then the paperwork, I think that's why a lot of times, even if they're not happy, they'll go back because they think, well, I signed, or I hate to tell them, that I don't want to work with them anymore, but sometimes you got to do what you have to do. It's easier for me to say that because I'm more of a straight shooter person. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell someone quick, but I run across that a lot. And I think it's more so of they're not happy, but they're afraid. And even when I explain it to them, like, okay, if you signed, you can still get out of it. You just need to let them know you want to terminate. And there is a form to terminate, but most won't go that far. And then some agents will wait, until it's time to do all the contracts to have someone actually sign and be committed. So it varies from agent to agent.
Okay. Yeah. And you're right. It can be very uncomfortable, especially if it's someone, because that sort of kind of was one of the situations that we ran into, because it was someone that I was a little bit more familiar with. But almost immediately off the gate, it was, well, before, I start looking at different homes, and I can send you a few things that I see, but before, we get into really sending a whole lot of stuff, we got to sign a contract and all that. And It's just like, oh God, how do I tell them we decided to go a different way?
Yeah.
Like you said, like, I mean, literally in a process like this, in such a huge purchase,
It is.
this is not the time for you to worry about someone else's feelings because at
That's
the
right.
end of the day, you're going to be living in that house. So if you didn't allow yourself the opportunity to go and shop around for the agent that you felt fit you the best and that would get you the best solution for your needs, then
Yep. Yep. I agree.
so you just gotta, like you said, shoot it straight.
That's right. And it's so, and I know everybody's different, but I guess their worry is they're going to hurt somebody's feelings. But it causes more damage if they find out you have been talking to somebody, or if the agents know each other, which a lot of us do know each other. So like just be upfront. Just be. Nobody's going to chew your head off or be upset if you just just tell them like it is, and that way you're not wasting anybody's time, and we can all move on.
That's right. That's it. Hey, this is a transactional purchase. This is a transaction. And so, just like if you were going into a shoe locker and you walked in, your friend works at shoe locker, but the shoes you want ain't at shoe locker. It's at Journeys. You're not just going to buy from shoe locker because your friend works there, I would imagine. But I really think that this has been some very valuable information, Willette. I did want to give you the opportunity before we ended the interview to let us know, since you've gotten into this career and you said that you've been in the real estate you have been a real estate agent for how long again?
It'll be 8 years this summer.
8 years. That is awesome. And so throughout your career, is there a highlight of any sort, any milestone that you hit as a real estate agent that you were just like, man, this was it. This was the right thing for me to do?
Yeah, helping a client a while back who was turned down twice for a loan. And that's the thing too. Sometimes it just depends on the lender that you're working with. Every lender does not have every loan product for you. I mean, if you're denied by one lender, that doesn't mean that the next lender may not approve you. And so I referred him to a third. And his situation, though, it wasn't where I felt he could be denied across the board. I felt like there was a lender out there for him. We just had to find one that was a little lenient and more the right fit. And we did. The second lender that actually denied him told me he didn't have a chance unless he won the lottery.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. But third lender gave approval, and he was able to he had 4 kids, able to get a brand new house. So they were overjoyed, first time home buyer. And that I felt was really awesome. And that just kind of, I mean, because he stuck with it, we just kept moving. And I felt it, that there was just something out there for him, and he got his brand new house. So
that is amazing. I can't imagine just how rewarding it is for you whenever you have helped somebody in that kind of a situation, and then turn back to those other lenders, especially the second one, and be like, you said what now? He got his house and he got a brand new one at that.
He did.
Well, I am so proud that I had the opportunity to talk to you today. And how can individuals who want to reach out and get your help, how can they find you?
They can find me on Facebook. They can also reach out and message me. I have a business Facebook page as well, Roper Triad Realty, as well as my personal. So either one, that would probably be the easiest way.
Okay. Yeah. And do you have a website?
Yeah, it's ropertriadrealty.com.
Okay, ropertriadrealty.com. So you guys, if you're out there and you are looking at purchasing a home, we are still somewhat in the beginning of the new year. And I know for me, I am making the decision to make 2021 a much better and even greater year than 2020. And you might have some goals and some dreams, and maybe you've decided this year is the year I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to prepare to purchase my home. Or maybe you're saying, you know what, I think it's time for me to make some moves. I think I'm going to sell my home. And maybe you know someone who speaks Spanish, but they're looking for someone to represent them, a real estate agent to represent them. I encourage you to check out Willette at Triad Roper Realty. She is amazing. She knows her stuff. And she's an amazingly caring person. So, and I also want to encourage you guys that if you have not done so already, I want you to stop, take a moment, find a reason to laugh, and keep smiling. Until next time, and always stay blessed.